Hi, I'm Tara Walrod, and I am from the Blue Valley School District, and I have been both a teacher and a counselor for 19 years and a member of NEA for 19 years, and this is my Module 8. First, what I did was look at evaluation information just in the recent years. So starting around 2009 was when Race to the Top and the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation both began to put efforts forth and financial assistance forth to work to try to improve teacher evaluations in states. By 2013, in the United States, 15 states had already done this, but we moved to 28 states, started requiring teachers to be evaluated on an annual basis. And then we also moved from only 15 states to 41 states requiring student achievement data be part of the evaluation. When we look at new evaluation systems, some notes that we need to keep in mind is that they are or seem to be most heavily weighted on observation, although it does differ per state in the number of observations. Many states use objective measures like test scores. Some use statistical techniques, which I found interesting, the VAM, the value added model, which is actually a third party will take all the data and create a score for that teacher, and then that score will be used as part of the evaluation. Others use a weighted formula for their teacher evaluation, which does include student achievement and can actually be a large part of the data in their evaluation. Some key points for evaluation. Each state has their own evaluation, and it must consider more than test scores. That's federal law. Evaluations should be developed in partnership with teachers, and I totally do agree with that. I think classrooms can be very complex and lots of things need to be considered. So having teachers involved in the evaluation process is so important. Evaluations should have multiple measures, not just observations, not just test scores. Observations should have valid rubrics. Evaluations should include feedback and meaningful professional development. And I think most of us can agree that that is the purpose of the evaluation, is to give feedback for strengths and weaknesses and to help with professional development and what teachers should be studying or researching or getting better at. Teachers need training on evaluation systems. I think this is important. I'm a mentor to new counselors in the district, and I always go over the evaluation with them to make sure they understand what they're being evaluated on. I think most of them, the goal is to get that contract the next year, so people need to know what they're being evaluated on and how the system works. New evaluation systems should be piloted, and then evaluations and support systems should be audited for quality. And I also feel like always looking at new research and that they're research-based. And due process rights should always be considered. And then consider growing evidence that test scores don't necessarily improve instructional practice. And although I did read a couple of articles lately about how when teachers did tie their salary into improving test scores, that they did improve their test scores, but that doesn't necessarily mean their instruction changed or things. It just meant more test prep and less instruction in other areas. So I think that's the consideration that they're talking about. The importance of test scores don't necessarily mean the instructional practice is improved by that teacher. In Blue Valley, the evaluation looks at 4 constructs, and they are learner and learning, content knowledge, instructional practice, and professional responsibility. And when you look at the evaluation, there are some key points that you will see and you could read about for your evaluation. They pride themselves that their evaluation is rigorous, that it includes, it's collaborative, transparent, and equitable to all. It's very important that it includes goal setting and that you set goals for yourself every year, whether you're on evaluation or not. That's important, and self-reflection. It's a continuous improvement model. It looks at multiple data points for both the formative assessment and the summative assessment for teachers, and the importance of basing it on multiple observations. So the actual evaluation in my district includes observations. Valid, reliable student achievement data is looked at. Artifacts from the classroom are looked at, and the teacher, the learning, things they're learning, projects they're doing. We do a lot of project-based learning that our administrators are really involved in. that there is evidence of teaching and learning, and then overall the evaluation looks at 4 components. And you are ranked in those 4 constructs in different areas of being highly effective, which means that you consistently do it, effective, which means you usually do it, developing, which means you sometimes do it, or ineffective, which means it's rarely seen in your classroom or done with your students. Observations in Blue Valley, it depends on the year and how long you've been in Blue Valley. If it is your first or second year in Blue Valley, you will have at least 1 observation per semester. And that first observation will be within the first 60 days of school. If you are in year 3 or year 4, or and then every 3 years after that in Blue Valley, you will have at least 1 observation per year. Although it is highly encouraged that there are lots of informal observations from the administrator and that there's a lot of reflection on artifacts and data proof in those, not just those observations. Then there are stages in Blue Valley. In looking at each construct, use of evidence has to be used to prove or disprove performance consideration. So the first stage is where I've always been. It's when the top 2, it means you have all the constructs are within the top 2 categories, highly effective and effective. It means you continually set goals for yourself and for your classroom and for your learning, and that you also, it monitors your professional development. You and your administrator will do that together. Stage 2 is when you get a developing in category, you're in the developing category in 2 or more components. And if that is to happen, then you are put on what's called a growth plan. And you also get some focused assistance. And that means not only from the administrator, but we are fortunate in our district that we have instructional coaches assigned. They're assigned to several buildings. So we have one, and she's there 1 day a week. And she is there not only to help our new teachers, but she is there to help our teachers that are on growth plans. And her duty is to be an instructional coach to help teachers be better at their practice. And then should you move to stage 3, which means you have an ineffective in any category, in any of the components, then you are put on what's called an intensive assistance plan. This is where you will not only get assistance from the administrator and the instructional coach, but you will also probably go observe other classrooms. There will be certain goals set for you and a time limit for you to meet those goals. As far as the recommendation for renewal, if you look at our negotiated agreement, you will find that teachers are to be given warning and a statement in writing that their contract will not be renewed. Teachers will be given 6 weeks to demonstrate improvement if based on incompetence or neglect of duty. If it's based on something else, then that's not necessarily the case, but if it is based on those 2 things, then they do get that time. And that's kind of where those stages come in with the growth plan and different things like that. The teacher is given the right to resign at the end of the contract, and members of NEA can have NEA consultation representation at any time. And that's true for anything we need. Anytime you want your NEA person to sit with you, he or she can do that. If a teacher is not satisfied with an evaluation and feels unjustly let go, then there are certain levels that they can go through in order to look at that. So the first level means the teacher files a grievance form within 10 days with the administration. So that is the first level. And then if they are not satisfied with the results of that, they move to level 2. This is where BVNEA and Human Resources will meet with that person and will go over the grievance. If still not satisfied, you can move to level 3. This is where you file a grievance with the superintendent. And then after finding the results of that, if you are still would like to move to level 4, then you can file a grievance with the Board of Education. The court case I chose to look at because, as I mentioned, I was interested in the VAM, that model. So I looked at the Houston Federation of Teachers versus the Houston Independent School District. And the foundation of that is that the Houston Union was seeking preventing them from using what was called the EVAAS, which is a VAM model. It is the Education Value Added Assessment System. And again, that is where the data is given to a third party. In this case, I believe it was in North Carolina. And then they would get a number, and then that number would be used for half their evaluation score. So when Houston started using this model, they actually terminated 221 teachers based on it. And that kind of spawned this court case where the Houston Federation of Teachers decided to sue the school district. Now, what their basis was only 7 teachers, and what I read about these 7 teachers was interesting in that even some of them had won awards for teaching, so these were highly effective teachers, but they were getting graded down, and they felt this was because of that if you taught at-risk students, ESL students, gifted teachers, then there was this risk of you scoring low on this EVAAS. So that was the foundation of the lawsuit. Now, it was ruled that the plaintiff did have legitimate claims regarding EVAAS in the Houston School District, and the judge did feel that they were in violation of their 14th Amendment due process protections, and it should go to trial. And that's where it is right now, still in progress. But on a side note, it was interesting, I did find in my research that the Houston School District actually ended its contract in 2016 from using EVAAS. So I'm not sure where the court case is going to go at this point, but it looks that way. Houston School District did make a point of saying they are not saying they will never return to it or won't look at other similar models, but as of right now, they're no longer on contract of using EVAAS. As a future school leader, I have to understand state policy, and I need to understand that state policy is what defines the purpose of the evaluation. And I also have to carefully follow and keep up with state and federal laws, along with all of these court cases that are going on regarding teacher evaluations. I also feel I will need to have a knowledge and deep understanding of the district evaluation process and that importance of collective bargaining. As I mentioned, I've been an NEA member, and I think that's an important piece of understanding and learning about a lot of how this comes to be. I feel the purpose of evaluations is to strengthen the understanding and skills of the teacher in his or her practice and improve teaching and improve learning for students. And I'm hopeful I can have this supportive climate that fosters growth for every teacher. And that doesn't matter if you are a first-year teacher or you've taught for 25 years. All of us can grow, and research is constantly coming out, and new innovative ideas are constantly coming out. So being able to help teachers with their strengths and weaknesses or where their learning can take place is so important. And then lastly, I also feel meaningful feedback related to strengths and weaknesses is vital. But I feel that feedback needs to be data supported. I need to see it, touch it, look at it. All of those things are so important when you are talking to teachers about their practice. As an administrator, I hope I can make fair and valid decisions when it comes to teacher evaluations. Especially when you're talking about someone's future employment with the district. You want to make sure that you are being thoughtful in the process. And then I understand as a teacher that, as I mentioned before, there are so many complexities in every classroom. And so having multiple data points, multiple observations, multiple artifacts, it's imperative in the teacher evaluation to understand what's going on in that classroom. But I also do feel it's important that we look at teachers' practice and that we want strong teachers teaching our kids. I have a child, and I guess I always think, would I want this teacher to be my child's classroom teacher? I think that's an important part, because if the answer is yes, then great. But if the answer is no, why is that, and how can we help that person improve? Or is this person an ineffective teacher and should possibly be looked at letting go? So that is my Module 8. Thanks so much.